I was taken to the United States when I was 8 years old. And today, I want to talk to you a little bit about what that was like. Greetings from Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, and welcome back to our YouTube channel. I'm sitting outside of Plaza Caracol right now waiting for my daughter to get out of Spanish class, and I figured I would share a little bit about me and my story so you can get to know me a little more. I know most of my YouTube videos so far have been vlogs about my life here with my family and activities that we do and my friends and that good stuff. But I think it's also important for you to connect with me and kind of get to know my story so you know exactly who you're subscribing to and what you are subscribing to. Right now, I couldn't really tell you what my goal or my objective is with this YouTube channel. I have dreams, big dreams and aspirations of someday being able to help this city and because this is the city where I was born. This is where my mother gave birth to me in Puerto Vallarta. Yo soy lo que se le dice una pata salada. Even though I wasn't raised here, I'm still connected to this place very much so. I have a lot of fond memories of my childhood here. But I don't know where we're going with this YouTube channel. I made this YouTube channel to express myself, to open up a little bit more about my life and who I am and what I've been through and all of the things that I don't talk about over on TikTok. So today I want to share this personal story with you and what it was like to cross the border at the age of 8. So I guess we should start by saying that even though I was born here in Puerto Vallarta, I wasn't necessarily raised here the first 8 years of my life. We lived in a small town known as Villa, Jalisco, which is in the middle of nowhere. And anytime we had the opportunity to come to Puerto Vallarta and visit my cousins and my aunts and my uncles, it was always good times. It was exciting. You don't have to tell me twice. I remember that. You don't have to tell me twice. We're going to Vallarta to see your cousins, right? We were ready to go before we even got told. And that's the way the story starts, believe it or not. Because we got woken up, I remember this vividly. Got woken up in the middle of the night by my grandmother. And she said, hey, we're going to see your uncle and your cousins. Tu tío Manuel y tus primos y primas. And got woken up in the middle of the night. It was pitch black outside. We packed, my grandma actually, as a matter of fact, she had the bag ready. She woke us up, we put our shoes on, and out the door we went. And that's how it started. I do remember that because I remember her asking her at one point during our trip, why hadn't our grandpa came, right? And her answer, her response was short and quick. It was, well, we'll be back in a couple of days. But little did I know that those couple of days turned into 23 years. And off we went, off our journey, it started off by getting in a car and just driving. We drove until we got to a bus terminal. I couldn't tell you, I'm gonna be honest, I couldn't tell you what city it was, what part of Mexico, because I'd be lying to you. All I know is that we got to a bus terminal, and then from there we got on a bus. And I remember once we took that bus, we went to a different part of Mexico. It was a small city or a large town, one of the two, right? Because it was a lot bigger than Villa. So, but it wasn't as big as Vallarta. So it was either a small city or a big town. And we got dropped off the bus there. And at the time, 8 years old, I didn't really know what was going on. But now that I am older and I'm an adult, I do realize that we got to that particular place to land in what would be called a safe house, where they kept, they housed the people that were making their way across the border. It was like your first stop. So we stayed at that house for about 2 to 3 days, I remember. And from there, we slept in the concrete. We slept on concrete floors. We didn't have mattresses. They didn't give us anything like that. The only thing we had were blankets. And I do remember that the room that we slept in was filled with roaches and mice. I remember that because I remember opening that door and just seeing roaches everywhere and seeing mice. But as a kid, you don't really think much about it, you know? Now, as an adult that has, my daughter Natalia, she's 7 years old, she's a year younger than the age that I was when I crossed the border. I couldn't imagine putting my kids through that, right? And it's not that I hold it against the adult people in my life at the time. It's just I think about it now as an adult, and I'm like, I could never put my daughter through that, right? But at the time, it was something that needed to be done for my brother and I to be reunited with my mom that was at the time in the United States. Because when we crossed the border, we did it with my grandma and my aunt. My mom was already on the other side because she had gotten a visa to work in the United States. And so we got to the safe house and we stayed there for a couple nights. After a couple nights were done, we got on another bus that took us to the border, right? I know it was the border because when we got off, it was the middle of nowhere. It was desert. There was nothing in sight. And I remember the bus driver, he got off the bus. It was a group of us. And the bus driver got off and he said, just walk straight that way. Just walk straight. He told us which way to go. And he said, eventually you're going to come across like a house, a building. And, then you'll know that you're at the right location. And so off we went walking. And we walked, I couldn't tell you how long we walked for. I'd be lying to you if I pinpointed a time. But we walked in the desert. We walked for a couple of, I don't know if it was a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. But I do know that we landed, we got to our location where we needed to be. And it was a building and it was a store. Perfectly put right there in the middle of nowhere. It's a store. And I remember it was a little store because I remember asking my grandma if she would buy me a piece of chocolate, and she didn't. But they gave us a gallon of water. Every group got a gallon of water. So that was my grandma, my aunt, Danny, and myself. Danny was 5 years old. So Danny was even younger than I was. And we had to survive off that gallon of water for the time that we were there at the desert. But we weren't at the desert for that long because what we had been told that at night, we were going to cross. That's what we had been told. And we sat in the desert. I call it the desert. We sat in the middle of nowhere for about 4 hours. 4 hours we were just sitting there doing nothing until it got dark. And when it got dark, they rounded us up and they took us into a wooded area that was closer. I assume it was closer to the border. And when we got to the wooded area, I do remember looking around and seeing groups of people just scattered everywhere. I do remember that. And I remember I was walking into this wooded area where we met what I would call El Coyote, the guy that was going to cross us over. And he rounded our group up, because there was several groups. He rounded our group up and said that we weren't going to be able to cross that night because it was too much heat. There was too much going on at the border. Security was on top of it, I guess. And they let us know that we were going to cross early into the morning. So we walked towards the woods when it was getting dark, 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, like when it was nighttime. And then they told us that we were going to cross right before the sunrise. So around 4 in the morning, 5 o'clock. And so we had to walk back to the middle of nowhere, the desert. And we had to sleep in the desert. My brother, Danny, and I slept on the dirt the night before crossing the border. My grandmother, bless her heart, she stayed up. She stayed up the entire night to make sure that nothing happened to my aunt, which at the time, she was a teenager. She was 18, 19. And I was 8 and my brother Danny was 5. And she stood up the entire night, sat on a bucket right over us and made sure that nothing happened to us. I remember the following morning, or the middle of the night, when we got woken up. I do remember this, and I'll never forget it. A lady was screaming, crying, that she couldn't find her daughter. And I left away with that, like just remembering that, I don't know what happened. I hate to think about it, but now as an adult, I can only assume that her daughter got kidnapped in the middle of the night. But I do remember the mother screaming, saying that she couldn't find her daughter, and or she was screaming for her daughter. We didn't know what happened, right? I don't know. I don't remember. I can only hope that that mother was reunited with her daughter. But my grandma, I just remember her telling us, like, come on, we gotta go, right? So now that I'm an adult and I think back of the situation, I'm like, man, like my grandma did everything she could to make sure nothing happened to us. You know, staying up. Man, it's 2001. It was 2001. She just sat there and what did she do? We didn't have cell phones. There wasn't technology back then. She just literally sat on a bucket and just watched over us for hours. And so we got woken up. It was in the morning. You know, it was like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, something like that. And we got rounded up and we got taken to the woods again, and we got thrown to the back of a pickup truck. And we were packed like sardines. One. And that's how we were packed. We were thrown in the back of a pickup truck. It was about 15 of us. 15. They packed us in the back of a pickup truck, and then they threw plywood on top of us, like 3 sheets of plywood. It wasn't thick plywood. It was thin, but they threw the plywood on top of us. And we rode on that truck for, man, I'd be lying to you if I said I knew the time, but it was a couple hours for sure. Because we left when it was pitch dark, and we arrived the sun was out in the morning. And we arrived in Houston, Texas. And in route as we were making our way from the border to Houston, Danny got caught between me and another adult. And at one point, I do remember Danny, by the way, lives here in Vallarta with me too. So at some point, we can retell the story with what he remembers. But I remember he couldn't breathe. I remember him crying. He was crying to my grandma. He was 5 years old. He was crying to my grandma saying, I can't breathe. And my grandma kept kicking the guy that was beside him because he was, how do you say, asfixiando? I don't know how you say it. He was kind of like over Danny. He was just like laying on top of him essentially. And my grandma kept kicking him and telling him to get off of him. It wasn't until the guy was able to move with what he could, right? I mean, I can't blame the guy so much because we were all packed there like sardines. You couldn't move. You had a board on top of us and we were packed side by side. There was nothing much that he could do. So I don't really think he was doing it on purpose. But eventually he was able to get off my brother, and Danny, he's alive today. So he made it out of there. But we got to Houston. We got dropped off in Houston into another safe house. And that is how we made our way to the United States. That was the journey. We got to Houston and we stayed there. We didn't even stay there that long. We didn't stay there overnight. We got to Houston. We got a plane ride, or we got a plane ticket, which to this day I still don't understand how that happened, because we only had, well, I don't know. I didn't have an identification. I was a child. My brother was 5 years old. I don't even know if my grandma and my aunt had their passports. I don't know how we were able, because now that I know what I know as an adult, and I know what it takes to get a plane ticket, to get on a plane, you have to have an ID, you have to have, although that was before 9/11, so things could have changed. But I don't know, pre 9/11, I don't know what it was like and how easy it was to have access to a plane without any identification. So we got on a plane from Houston, and then from Houston we went straight to North Carolina. And we arrived in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was the spring of 2001. And that is where we were reunited with my mother, after not being with her for a couple months. My mom had a visa where she would go back to Mexico for a couple months and come back, or go back to the States. And that's how she did it for a couple years, I think. until she made the decision of, you know, hey, you know what, I'm just going to bring my kids here and just bring them over. Now, it wasn't just because of that. There are other things that were going on in our family that, you know, caused or were also a part of the reason as to why we went to the United States. It wasn't just because my mother didn't want to do the back and forth anymore. There were other things that, as I get more comfortable sharing with you guys, I will talk about. But yeah, that's my story as to how I ended up in the United States. And you know what? I'm not the only one that has this type of story. I'm sure there are many people out there with similar stories to mine, because our journey to the United States as immigrants is almost identical. Different journeys, different paths, but the end destination is always the same. And now, after 23 years, right, what I was told initially that day by my grandma, oh, we'll be back in a couple of days. It was 23 years later. When I was in the United States, unfortunately, I lost my grandfather in 2010. You know, I never got to say goodbye to him. I never got to say, I never got to say goodbye to him. He's actually buried alongside my grandmother in Villa Guerrero, Jalisco. I've been in Mexico for about almost 3 years now, 2.5. And I talk about this on my TikTok a lot, that I don't have the courage to go visit them yet. Because going back to Villa Guerrero, right, it gives me chills just thinking about it, would mean having to open up the doors to all those emotions and feelings that I have tucked away for so many years. And I don't think I'm ready to experience that yet, because that would mean coming face to face with the reality that, you know, my grandfather it's weird, because you left as a child with your grandfather being alive, and then you come back 20 plus years later and you know that he's no longer here in that same town where he was left behind. So a lot of people talk about the return back home, right? The after, whether it be voluntary relocation or deportation, a lot of people talk about what that's like. They share their journey, their story, which is very important. But I think it's also important to talk about what it was like leaving, because leaving is, I would say, dare to say, more painful than coming back. Because when you leave behind your loved ones. You know, as for me, I left behind my grandfather. I left my cousins that I had a very, very tight connection with. We were tight. Me and my cousins were tight. And those relationships were fractured because of the distance. We grew apart, and it's normal. It's part of life. It's what happens when you're far away from your loved ones. You kind of just grow apart. Everybody grows up and starts their own life and starts to build their own life. And it's kind of like, yeah, I remember how it once was before we got taken to the States. But now we're back in Puerto Vallarta, back home. And I am looking forward to sharing more and more about the return, the reasons, and what it's been like, and what my initial first months here were like. And I'm going to be fully transparent talking about those things. Still triggers emotions that I can't control, which is why I haven't just sat down and talked about everything that happened that led to my return to Mexico. But at some point I will, because I owe it to my community that's slowly but surely, one at a time, coming together on this platform as well. And aside from talking and doing these sit downs, get to know me type of vlogs or posts or videos, whatever they're called, I'm also going to share a little bit about, you know, what we do as a family and what I do with my friends. And I'm going to take you to beaches and different colonias and show you all about Vallarta, and find a direction or a purpose for this YouTube channel, essentially, because I don't know what we're doing with it yet, But I do know that my goals and my dreams and aspirations are big, because now that I'm home, now that I'm back in this city, I want to do everything and anything I can to help kids, children especially. I was a soccer coach in the United States for 9 years, so I've always loved being around kids and helping them and hyping them up and motivating them and being a role model for them. Now I got my own kids that I can do that with, but I do hope to one day be a bigger, how do you say it? A bigger, just like how do you say it? Like a role model at a bigger scale for kids of the city, especially in the neighborhoods that are not as fortunate as some of the nicer neighborhoods in the city. But anyways, I hope you've enjoyed my yapping session. I'm really good at them, especially over on TikTok. And I still don't know how to close out a YouTube video, so just drop me a thumbs up if you can relate to the things that I said. Maybe drop me a comment if you know anybody that has gone through something similar, or maybe you are married to somebody that went through that, or maybe you are somebody like myself that went through it and can relate to the things that I said. And I hope you stick around for this journey as we continue to create more content and figure out exactly where we're going to go with this channel. We're going to share some personal things. My wife and I are going to have talks about what it's been like returning back to Mexico. We'll show you the city. We'll show you different colonias. We'll show you beaches around the city and all the things that you can do here. A little bit of everything until we find our purpose. But nonetheless, once again, I hope you stick around to see the growth of our community on here. And I wish you have a wonderful day. All right, my daughter is about to get out of class, so I'm going to go grab her and go back home. Much love to you guys. Peace.